this topic here, guys, is something I've done this video a couple different times, and it has a couple different elements into it. And I didn't, I'm trying to do it as short and sweet as possible and not get too lengthy, but try to make the point. So we're kind of gonna break it apart, but we're gonna get right to the point there, and then at the end of it, if I got any time, I'll kind of go back through as an overview. One of the biggest things that I see that dates back to my first days in the industry, all the way back to guiding, is I've always have researched and experienced different phases of pressure. Now, to me, I like to break the season in general, and this goes for all over the country. I like to break the season into phases as far as 1, 2, and 3. Now, we're going to talk about the 3 phases of the pressure and stand locations, how they pertain to those areas at what point of the season. So number one, and the goal is to help guys understand what phase you're hunting in. So if you start hunting an area that has low pressure, that you're already starting at phase 1. Now if you go in and start hunting an area that has already had a bunch of pressure in, you need to know how to adjust your stand locations accordingly. So you may already be hunting a phase 2 or phase 3, and then you'll be running that phase and throughout the whole season. So I see time and time again is guys thinking that they're hunting a early season phase 1 because it's the beginning of season, no pressure, and they're hunting a phase 2 and they're already a step behind the entire season. Something I picked up a long time ago, something that I've been kind of teaching along the way, and I've just, like I said, I've done this video a couple different times, and I'm trying to really get to the point and really kind of make it, break it down step by step. So we're going to start here with phase 1. Phase 1, obviously, in a lot of parts of the country, I'm just going to use October 1st as an archery opener. If you're in the western states, September 1st, mid-October in, let's say, Wisconsin. I think theirs is the 12th this year. So adjust this phase 1 per your area and per your opening day archery season. Phase 1 is an unpressured situation where you go in, you have controlled your late season, your scouting right before the early season has started. You know that you're the only ones in there. You know how you got in and out of those stands. You've been getting velvet pictures, and you're entering this phase 1 knowing that you've got some patternable bucks on early season patterns that are still reachable as far as that first couple days of the season. Knowing the phase 1, though, what I see is the first topic that we're going to talk about during the early season phase 1. The first point that I want to talk about is a state that has a early hunt, such as the state of Michigan, where we're based out of here. Michigan has a early youth hunt that's always a week before the bull or the archery opener here. So not the video to discuss if you're for it or against it. I'm here to just show you and teach you what happens during those and what to prepare yourself for. These youth hunt, disabled hunts, them early hunts, if they are allowed to gun hunt, that can trigger a phase 1 earlier. Now a phase 1 is, like we said, an unpressured situation. That's what you're shooting for in a phase 1. Now, if you're in an area like Michigan, has the early youth hunt end of September, which is a week before the archery opener, you have to realize that a lot of so tying stand placements in here with phase 1, a lot of mentality, because early season bucks are patternable. It's a youth hunt early. We want the kids to be successful. We want to be successful as a family. We want to be able to have a good time and that kind of starts the hunting season for a lot of folks. Successful or not, as far as putting something, a buck in the truck, it's a way to get everything started into the fall. It gets our mindsets going. But the easiest thing that people do, the biggest thing that people do because of ease, is they focus on early season patterns as far as velvet bucks, or early season bucks being out in bean fields, on food plots that you've prepared for the fall hunt. By doing that, if you are taking these kids to the box blinds, let's say, with a rifle, here in the state of Michigan, and some other states, you can actually, the youth can hunt with a bow or a rifle. So we're going to talk about both spectrums here. But the first spectrum is if your kids, depending on the age spectrum, if you're going to send them into certain areas as far as bow hunting, make sure that they're ready to get to that element so you don't set them up for disaster. And we're going to talk about a stand location situation here in just a second. That we'll touch on that. But as far as the gun hunting during this phase 1 early season in a youth hunt, by doing that, you could, depending on where you're at in the country. Now we're talking about, I'm going to talk about high pressured states first. You're in a high pressured state where the deer are triggered into a October lull, into a phase 2, into an October lull because of pressure. So we know that. So what I see is folks not adjusting from the early season pressure before the opener, like we adjust our stand locations pre-rut and into the rut. That same switch stand location mentality has to happen early. That happens then, and it doesn't happen a lot of times. So knowing this early season pressure on these early season youth hunts, if it's a gun situation, we're going to go to box blinds and take these kids into there. And I'm not saying don't take them into a spot where they are not going to be successful. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about knowing how to take the pressure, or why that you should take the pressure off their destination feed locations and not hunt those areas with a gun. Not start the pressure, the cycle of pressure, the number 1 phase in the pressure spectrum here. You're starting that in an early season, on a early season youth hunt, by focusing your attention on destination feed locations. Now, what is the thing to do then? If I'm not recommending that you put these kids in box blinds or in a rifle blind situation, where do you put them? The blinds are great. Ground blinds are okay, are great too. The idea is here, the topic is where to be. Now, we're going to switch to, I'm going to show you on the iPad here, as far as the designs that I do, or where I recommend these stands placements. You want to have those, if it's a rifle situation, you can reach out and touch things in the effective yard in the distance. You want to be able to take the kids out or off the destination feed locations, and obviously early season you don't want to be in bedding areas. You don't want to ever be in bedding areas, but you don't want that pressure going in. Let's say in an evening hunt situation, you do not want to take those kids too tight in there when you can reach out and touch something. So I encourage you to look at the possibility of pulling the kids off the youth hunters off, or the disabled hunters off from the destination feed locations, and placing them in transition areas off of a normal archery situation, that your chances of not getting busted are higher, because scent preparation, kids moving around, that's half the fun, putting the kids in the blinds or in the ground blinds and wrinkling papers. And as Si's behind the camera here, he's laughing because he's been the kid before that I've threatened to put a ratchet strap on him, and that's how lessons are learned. That's how experiences, that's how memories are made. So that has to happen. But what I'm saying is, take that out, take the kids outside of the core area that we have to be in as bow hunters, or they could be into. Take them out of that spectrum, place them on the outside. Then what that does is, like I said, the chances of getting busted, the chances of getting winded are lower. The movement can be a little more. You can reach out and touch things in like a gun hunting, like we're used to gun hunting situations. Take them outside of it, but get them off the destination feed location, so these deer, you don't interrupt the cycle of the does getting up out of their beds closest to feed, going out to the destination feed locations feeding, and then going and the bucks transitioning out in there. Early season, these bucks aren't that far away from the feed, or they could be not that far away from the feed, not with the does, but still behind the does. So you're still hunting behind the does, but you're not starting the pressure of when you pull the trigger. You have to know that when you pull the trigger, at whatever time, pulling the trigger as of hunting the destination feed locations, and or pulling the trigger on a gun during that early season, could throw your bow hunting spectrum, your bow hunting pressure, your ideas, your stand locations. It could throw you into very easily throw you into phase 3 the first week of October, and now you've got to battle that the entire year. So this is teaching you how not to be able to hunt 1, 2, and 3, and 3 stretching all the way into the end of the season, 90 days into your hunt, not taking a 3 and throwing it right the first week of season and struggling the entire time. So that youth hunt, taking them off, putting them in the transition areas. If it's a bow situation, that's guns. So you're not shooting the deer off from the destination feed locations. It's a way. I'm not saying, like I said, to take the kids out of this success. I'm saying build the property. If you're leasing a property, hunting a family member's property, whatever the case is, you have to take the time and to scout how to get these deer in those transition areas, because it sounds simple. You know, I had the question, what's the difference of shooting the deer with a gun in a transition area versus shooting the deer out in the destination feed location? It's a great question. The idea is the destination feed locations, whether that's a cornfield, a bean field, a food plot, whatever that destination feed location is in your setting, that is their safe haven, their evening safe haven, their 4th feeding, 5th feeding of the day. That's where they want to go. That's where they want to feel unpressured. That's where they want to feel at ease, just as they feel in their bedding areas. If you interrupt that in their bedding or in their feeding, you now create the nocturnal spectrum of between A and B. That's why it's so powerful to, and I encourage you to just try it for a year. I encourage you to try it for that first couple of weeks. If it doesn't work, if it don't make a believer out of you first, then you don't have to do it again. But I'm here to tell you, most of the folks, the majority of the people that I help learn how to do this are believers. Size standing behind the camera now, he can attest to this as far as how powerful this is. We have a very small, we hunt some other farms and we hunt some state ground situations, but this mentality on private property, when you're hunting destination feed locations, or even out on state ground, if you knew where those feeding locations were, not interrupting that is a huge deal. Side access, like I've taught all the other videos that tie to this, but so that's the first spectrum. Try not to do that. That's the stand location that ties to it. That's the reason why you don't want to do that. So pressured and hanging, the second step of that is pressure and hanging stands and scouting late. It's the same, not as far as pulling the trigger in the gun situation, but it is taking the stand locations and going in late that last couple of days right before October 1st. And I've been there, I've done it, I've ran late on stuff, I've tweaked stuff right at the end, but you have to know that those last few steps, that rush could potentially cause phase 2 way earlier. So I encourage you to, if you're a guy that takes the big thing is now hunting with the saddles, kind of cool, or it gives you a lot of more opportunities, or there's a couple things there that a different video we'll talk about, but as far as shooting lanes and all that stuff that come into that. But knowing that you can go in on a leased farm or a private piece of property, or even on state and federal grounds, knowing that you can go in and get those stands prepared early, and you give it just a week, even 2 weeks. I'm talking, I like to have all my stuff done. We try to have all of our stuff done by the middle of September, and then I have a 2 or 3 week window. I like September 1st. A lot of times that ends up being the middle of September, which is 2 or 3 weeks before like a Michigan opener. So just keep in mind, the closer you get to the opener, whatever that date is, you're just taking the opportunity of maybe getting busted. You're cutting the lines of travel, and that time of the year is, they already know the mentality. And I'd like to touch on one thing here, is so the deer, you have to understand that the deer that you're getting pictures of today in July and August are not the deer that you're going to be hunting October 1st. Physically, yes, they're the same deer. Mentally, they're not the same deer. And the reason is because of three phases of a pressure spectrum. That's why they're not the same deer. They're not the same deer that are just easily going in and out of these trail camera locations, these mineral sites, whatever the case is, getting their picture taken. You're in there, you're grabbing cards with no gloves on, you got tennis shoes on, checking the trail camera, whatever. You're not going to get away with that, because they already know it's It's the pressure sense, especially in a high pressured state, that they know that fall is coming. They know, especially if they're older, over a 1.5 year old buck that has experienced it before, a 1.5 year old deer, I should say, because they throw does into that too. They know that fall is coming. They know why the pressure is building. They get that, and if once you give them that respect, you'll understand why this is so important. So number two is, so that's understanding phase one. The object is to not create an early season pressure, so you're not going in to an October 1st or a first week archery opener thinking that you're hunting a non-pressured situation, going in and things just didn't happen the first week. You don't know why. It's got to be, these are the examples, the excuses, but the topics that I hear are, it's pressure, the neighbors must be doing something different. There's not enough feed this year. The acorns are changing. I could go on and on and on about reasons that folks think that things are different. Majority of the time is, I'm going to reach out there and I'm going to say 90% of the time is because you didn't understand whether it was your pressure, neighbor's pressure. You didn't understand the youth hunt. You don't know exactly what has been created, or you are in that spectrum of taking the youth hunters out into these destination feed locations, and you have now started, and that's a topic down here highlighted, but you have now started the chain of pressure. As soon as you do that, I'm not saying that your cameras are showing that these mature bucks are there, and night after night after night in daylight, and you can, your cameras are going on food plots, and not to say that you can't get it done. In the Midwest, in the state of Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, those states, the Midwestern states, I still don't design my farms, and I still don't recommend that my folks do that, but in those states, you can possibly get away with that. In the high pressured states, you have to know, I would not go into even with pictures, I would not go into a location with proof that he's going to be there, banking on a mature buck's going to be there on a food plot, on a licking branch on the edge of a food plot. I would not go into that situation and just hopefully that he's going to be there and I get to kill him, because as soon as you take that step, into a food plot, whether that's a morning, which I don't recommend ever, an evening, getting into a food plot and having the chance to kill that buck over the food plot, I'm not that guy. And the reason is depending on where you're at and all these different spectrums that play into that, whatever that percentage is, if it doesn't happen, now you got to get out. And in a high pressured state, you have now triggered that response, and that's a response that you'll fight for the next 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the case is. As soon as you get busted, as soon as you get that pressure, you create that pressure, getting off that food plot, it puts all of these three phases, puts phase 3 all the way to the top, and now you're struggling with it, like I said, the rest of the season. So you can see, so inside of that October lull, one is determining when the October lull starts. I have seen everybody, I always use the date of October 11th is my October lull, date. And the reason I say that is usually it's the first 10 days of an opener. Now if you're in Wisconsin, like this year, that date would be around the 20th or the 23rd, let's say, or whatever that 10 days is off the opener. That's how everybody comes up with the October 11th date that you hear of the October lull starting. Fact of the matter is, guys, I'm here to tell you, I've seen the October lull as early as October 1st in the state of Michigan because of a youth hunting situation, because guns out into food plots, out in destination feed locations. I've had hunters call, and that has started, and that is an October lull. An October lull isn't by date, an October lull is by pressure. So, but on the other spectrum, I've seen the October lull. I've guided through the October lull in the state of Illinois sometimes where it's the 17th and 18th. That, depending on the pressure, depending on number of hunters that you've had on farms when I was guiding, depending on all that, that number could be, that date could be the 17th, 18th, and it all stems back to pressure. So that's understanding phase 2. And the last point is adjust accordingly. In other words, the faster that the October lull you push the envelope with the October lull, the faster you create that, is the faster you have to respond in a stand location situation because of that. Now, number 3 is the phase 3. Number 3 is the pre-rut, the rut, going into the pre-rut or the rut, hunting bedding areas, stuff like that. That is when you want to be able to take this phase 3 from the end of October, hunt it all the way through the rut, get through the month of November, and it back into the feeding patterns, so these deer actually go back into more of a phase 1 pressure feeding, back out into these destination feed locations in more mass and more numbers, you know, later in the season, going back to greens. That's why this spectrum, as far as phase 3, can put that. Once you understand phase 3, it will make you understand that you want to be able to hunt phase 3 from the pre-rut all the way through. But if October lull starts early, now you've, instead of dealing with, you know, being able to hunt that phase 3 all the way through the rest of the season and having a pyramid of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, this bottom paragraph right here is what puts all of this obsolete and puts this whole bottom number 1 right to the top. In my experience, that's why I feel so strongly, is because I teach my kids, I teach my clients, I teach everybody that I design properties on, that I speak to, seminars. Everything is designed off from getting the pressure off the destination feed locations, and tonight we're going to label it getting the pressure off the food plots. The reason is, guys, is because if you go in and you take the youth hunters into those destination feed locations or the food plots, you took one phase of the phase 3 spectrum. You took number 1 completely out of that. Now you're hunting the first week of the season. You are possibly hunting an October lull. The first time you go into a tree stand, you may have created an October lull the first week of season. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to see my kids be that guy. I don't want to see any of my clients be that hunter having to face that battle of already facing an October lull, because you've already started the pressure through a late hanging of stands, taking those youth hunters out, letting those guns ring on the food plots, going out there, starting that whole pressure scale. This is why this is so important to understand. So we're gonna tie this in as far as stand placements. So we talked about phase 1, early season, what to do with the kids, getting them off from the destination feed locations into those transition areas, but off so you can still see. I highly use your. This is something that I touch on. I always, I'm often asked if you're taking them off the spotlight of being able to reach out a couple hundred yards on a destination feed location and shoot these deer out in the bean field where they're feeling comfortable. Where do we go? What can we supplement that with? And guys, that is a licking branch. Supplement your destination feed location with that licking branch between bedding and the destination feed location, behind your does. If you're in a situation where the kids can still see the does out in the food plot, that's great. But if you're creating that noise and that threat, that hunter threat behind the does, it doesn't have the same impact as shooting those does during the youth hunt, or shooting those bucks, mature bucks, young bucks, whatever you're shooting out in those destination feed locations. It does not have the same response. So put those licking branches in those transition areas. That's where I recommend. So transition area, licking branch, focus the attention there. Maybe it's a water hole. Maybe you can get them to hit a water hole depending on where you're at early before they go out. If the kids are bow hunt worthy as far as their ability, I highly recommend, do not put kids, and there's no age that I can tie this to, because like Cy, my son elected to 1 year use archery equipment, so use his bow when I think he was 12 or 13 when he first killed his first buck with a bow. But The reason I put him in that situation is because he had proved, or I knew that he was ready, poundage wise, accuracy wise, he was ready to have that opportunity. What comes outside of accuracy in that window is being proficient in a tree stand. Even though it's early in the season, even though it's not cold and you don't have the jitters, you still have them younger kids just aren't experienced enough to know that they need to not moving around in those situations. That's why I encourage you, get them some deer under their belt. If you believe in the youth hunt, get them, wait until, because our youth hunt here in Michigan goes until 16, so by the time they're 14, 15, 16, then they understand a little bit more about tree stand etiquette, or I guess however you want to say that, as far as what you can get away with in the tree stand, what you can't get away with in the tree stand last year. So this year I've talked about that a couple of times, and he's everything but giving me the bird behind the camera here, but he learned a valuable point last year. We start in those situations where we try to shoot sitting down, and he felt that he needed to stand up in that situation. And the stand that we had him in, I was not too far from him with my nephew, and that was his first kind of sole mission, if you would. Put him in the stand and over Licking Branch, and had a 3-year-old come up, and I mean, it would have been the biggest buck that a lot of viewers that probably had every opportunity, and he had that opportunity, and just one wrong move. We still don't know to this day if the wind switched, if the stand squeaked, if he got busted moving, what happened. But the moral of the story is the buck did not get shot, and he was pretty devastated, to say the least. But he's sweating behind the camera as we're talking here, so I mean, he won't make that mistake again. I feel very comfortable, or very positive saying that's something that I can't teach. I can preach, but you can't teach it until that happens. So don't put those kids in that situation. Don't set them up for failure until they're ready to get inside of that window, outside of the gun situation and transition area. Put them in there into a bow spot when they're ready, when you know that it's not going to ruin, it could ruin future hunts for them, or it could discourage them. You don't want that to happen. None of us want that to happen, whether it's in the youth hunt or later in the year. Don't put them in that position until you know they're ready. So that takes care of the stand locations early. Second phase, we as adults, the kids involved in it too, our wives, our hunting partners, whatever. Now we're going to the woods with our archery setups, and we need to know where to be. Guys, this is where understanding your farm's habitat improvements, or simply if it's on a farm where you haven't been able to do any habitat improvements as far as leased farms, very powerful. Those situations need to be still off from destination feed locations, but the focus that I put on early season as far as week 1 is, and hopefully you haven't started this, this spectrum like we talked about. Hopefully you haven't jump started this, so you're not hunting pressure deer already. But inside corners are very powerful. Inside corners where you can get in and off the destination feed location and not get busted. Inside corners, you can hunt certain inside corners in the morning. You can hunt a lot of inside corners in the evening. Inside corners evening are very powerful sits, but that's where you need to focus your attention. I highly recommend all these stand locations that we're talking about, having the Licking Branch, having the mock scrape, add a water hole to them if you need, but all of them should have a Licking Branch and a mock scrape under them. Inside corners, have a setup, have a knowledge going into it that if it's an October situation where it's going to be south winds, then a south wind, then you need north inside corners. In other words, if it's a southeast wind, you need a northwest inside corner to hunt on the south winds. If it's a north wind coming from the northwest wind, that's what, to me, the most talked about, the most powerful corner is an southeast inside corner. And the reason is, as I've talked about that before, is because a northwest wind blows directly into a southeast corner. So that you have to have those setups. But like we talked, if it's a north wind, a northwest wind early in the season, blowing into a southeast corner, you shouldn't be hunting the north side of that blowing into that corner. So you have to know the wind, but focus on pinch points, transition areas. Inside corners are where you can get a lot of this done. Now, with that said, I'm going to touch on something here real quick that I talked with a client here this week about. Inside corners, you're not on the field, a destination feed location. You're close to on an inside corner. A lot of times, obviously, it's an inside corner of a field. So the perfect situation is if you can place that. You can get tighter to the field if you have contour that goes out into a field that rolls the deer away from out of the timber out into the field where they're feeding, over a ledge, over a roll in the hill, that they go out into the field. Obviously, that's like a screening. It's a natural screening to get in and out of it. If you don't have that natural roll where the deer are 20 yards just outside into a food plot or a destination feed location, corn, beans, whatever that case is, alfalfa this early season, if you don't have that contour to get those deer away from you, you have to be further in an inside corner. So is that 20 yards? Is that 50 yards? Is that 100 yards? That all depends on the habitat, the density that you feel comfortable enough you can get in and out of that stand location. Focus on the inside corners, back off the inside corner depending on what you have screening. If you got screening right on the edge of the field, then obviously you can be tucked right pretty tight behind that with your in your inside corner stand, knowing that the deer, when they get out into that, visually take into mind, you got to throw the spectrum in there of not being heard. But what I'm saying is screening, contour, you can get closer to the fields. Now, if you don't, like I said, you got to pull yourself closer or farther back in those destination feed locations. So number 3, the pre-rut and the rut. Two spots that I see a lot of fads, a lot of throwing stuff at the window, trying to get stuff to stick, and you're thinking the ball starts rolling like, I didn't get something killed phase 1, I didn't get something killed phase 2, I'm past October lull, I'm going to eat a tag. It's when accidents start happening, when nonsense starts being done. I encourage you to take this recommendations as far as understanding the 3 phases that I have known throughout the years, understanding these 3 phases, so you don't have to get to a point where you start throwing anything at the wall. That's when it's just stupid mistakes, not playing the wind, getting internal. Preseason and pre-rut and the rut, make sure that you're hunting outside of bedding areas. It's a huge fad right now. It's a huge fad like hunting over food plots, if you ask me. I like to hunt closer to those bedding areas. But guys, if you can't get off a feed area, a destination feed location as far as a food plot, what in the world makes people think that they can get out of a bedding area, out of a tree stand? Now, I like to help people understand that it's like island hunting, or in a marsh situation. Let those bucks go back to bed. Let them go back in their location. Let them go back to bed. You have to just gauge your stand location on how close you can get to that to take advantage of them coming out of those buck bed areas, them secluded areas, going out into transition areas, behind doe bedding areas, whatever that case is. But you have to know the habitat has to fit that. Hunting inside of these running trail cameras is something I see right now, running trail cameras, internal bedding areas. I've got clients, I've got many people right now that I talk to, on a day-to-day or a weekly basis, that are hanging trail cameras in bedding areas right now because they want to see if their habitat improvement worked. Huge mistake. Unless it's a cell cam and you plan on leaving that from September, you shouldn't be inside of them right now. Doing that anyway. If you're adding some habitat improvements on it, that's one thing. But if it's already set, the stage is set, and you're going in and out of those locations, it's the same theory of going in those locations during the rut and messing that situation up. You can't physically get out of them. So take the time, look at your transition areas, fit your stand locations, whether that's a box blind, whether it's a gun situation, whether it's a bow, whatever that case is. Make sure you're outside of both of those spectrums. Don't place these stands on the food plots. Don't place these stands in bedding areas. Push the envelope of the bedding area, but you have to be able to get out. And I'm talking if if you have a doubt that a buck is going to come into that area, worst case scenario, bed down. What if it's not the buck that you want to kill? You stand a chance of blowing him out of there. If it's an immature buck that comes in, beds down at 30 yards, you want to leave. You get up, he blows out. That deer not only blows, you not only blow that deer out. It's a chain effect. You could blow 2 or 3 buck bed situations out. You could blow the entire doe bedding out. So that's why, to me, I like the pre-rut and the rut. You get closer to those bedding areas. Those stand locations hopefully are already set because of your created. If it's a leased property, you're hunting out on, or you're hunting out on public ground, move those stand locations closer to those. But this is the topic right here on the bottom. Like I said, if you decide early season, first week of October, to hunt the food plots in a high pressured state, if you decide to hunt the food plots, you have now started phase 3. Week 1, you're now starting. You have physically jump started that. You have taken your 3 phases of the pressure spectrum out of the equation, and you're now hunting phase 3, and you're going to struggle with that phase 3. You could very well possibly struggle with that through the entire season. That's why I encourage you to break this apart. When I hear clients talk about stand locations, I hear stand or rifle blinds. Perfect example. I'm gonna use a percentage here, and it's over 90%. It's kind of hard to believe that, but it is. The hunters that I speak to, the hunters that we work with, all over the spectrum here, whether it's I'm working on your property or not, or you're listening to this video, whatever it is, if you can relate to this, you're probably relating to it in a way of the youth hunters that you're hunting the last week of September are sitting in the same blinds as you're sitting in rifle season. Let that sink in. Think about that. 2 totally different times of the season, 3 totally different phases of the pressure of the hunting season, same stand. So you're already behind. You're already placing yourself behind. Opportunity rate is way lower than it could be by just not understanding the 3 phases. Same stand that you're hunting in September, same rifle blind that you're hunting in November. Totally different movements, totally different deer habits, totally different deer habitat required, and you're still hunting the same stand. Do a lot of people have success by doing that? Yes, they do. But the reason that they have success doing that is deer are getting pressured from other farms. There's other things that play into it that are the minority. They're not the majority that you want to focus your attention and have this be a year after year after year after year success. How many times have you heard that Joe's son shoots a big buck every year in that blind in youth hunt, and Joe kills a big buck out of that blind with a rifle? It happens a lot, but it's not the majority. It's not the majority. And after you understand how to fit this system in, that's why I come into play. And as you can tell, I got a lot of passion built up about this, because you can have the perfect habitat, and I do. I've been on a farm just a couple weeks ago. There's nothing that they're missing as far as the goal. We talked about tweaking a few things, but as far as habitat, the deer that are there, but what they didn't have is they didn't understand the 3 phases. So they automatically, they take a bunch of youth hunters, which is great, but they go in and they think that they're hunting a phase 1 unpressured deer situation. And on that farm, they were hunting already starting their season on phase 3, and they're a step behind. They weren't connecting, and I'm talking about mid-Michigan area where they have 3, 4, 5-year-old deer on their farms, and they're not killing them. They're not harvesting them on a year after year after year basis, and it's a once every now and then situation. The reason is because they don't understand the 3 phases of the pressure. So 3 phases of pressure, different stand locations, your evening sits, your morning sits and your stand locations all need to change and fit the 3 phases of pressure. Hope that makes sense, guys. Something, like I said, I feel very strongly about, something that I teach, and I feel that I could turn my son loose at 14 years old, and he already understands where this phase falls in, where the pressure falls in, and how that makes or breaks your season.